it out, boy.
Yo,
You be tripping.
we already told Brother Isaiah a couple weeks ago that's his whole platform. He comes in on some Teddy Pendergrass.
For real.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Okay, we are officially live.
Officially live.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to share it to my page real quick, and then we can jump into it.
let me go ahead and share to mine too.
Yeah, I just tried to share it, but I don't think I did it correctly.
You got to share it with your voice, man.
Is that what we're doing now? Share our voices.
I'm almost messing with you, man. I'm leaving that. Half a second, man. Half a second.
This is drop the elbows on Brother Isaiah Day. I see. Okay, we live now. I'm looking at it live.
Yeah, so I ain't gonna worry about it because this stuff is aggravating. Okay. Get out of it and in scene. Welcome. Okay, here we go. All right. Welcome everybody to another episode. This is Love Language Roundtable. And last week, first of all, pray everybody's having a good day so far. Last week we talked about managing conflict in intimate relationships. So this is part 2. We discussed a lot last week from doing practice conflict runs, like the Shema said, that test to see how you would handle a conflict in a relationship. We define what conflict is. So a disagreement or any situation that can be initially that needs work to be resolved, and then we talked about ways to address them both before and once you're already in a covenant relationship. So that was kind of what I remember that we discussed. But because the topic was so long, we thought this week we would talk about other people. What does it look like when conflict is coming from outside of your household, and then how to household, even relationship. So we use words like household and union, right, but we know that people are at different stages of whatever that is. So this could be, y'all could just be friends. I don't know. So today's topic is called the us and them, and I'm gonna read the synopsis for it, and then if y'all wanted to say a few thoughts, about the title, then we could, or something from last week, we could do that. So it says, last week we discussed the inevitability of conflict within intimate relationships and ways to address disagreements before they spiral out of control. But what do we do when the source of discord comes from those outside of our relationships? What role, if any, does the media play in all of this? Should we listen to the cares and concerns of relatives when it comes to our union? And how do we address such conversation without risking the loss of family members, friends, etc., co-workers, pets? I think the pets would be hating on us too if they could. They'd be barking at us. Okay. Thank you, Zebulon, for laughing. Okay. Anybody?
I'm sorry.
No, I need to know I'm funny. I think I'm funny, but I can't be the only one. So did anybody want to jump in and say some words from last week?
All right. Well, I'll jump in. This is Shema. I know I'm black right now, with white letters.
You blacker than black. You black.
That's okay.
There's a science behind that. Black with white letters, brother. No.
Yeah.
My kind of came out of me for a second.
Well, I think that this is a great topic just to open up. I want to get back to like us opening up. If we could, our thoughts kind of warm up each individual perspective concerning the topic. So warming up, I think that this is a huge topic, or a what's the word I'm looking for? A follow-up from last week, because this has to do with relationships. A big thing in relationships, concerning individually, just collectively, the man and the woman. And then next is the outside influences, which I think is the number one cause, aside from people who say finance and all that, to failure in relationships. Because it's like we go towards the outside, or look toward the outside more than what's within. So we tackle the conflict of one another individually, as far as man and woman. how we can deal with it last week. This week, opening up for the outside conflict, I would say that I think it's important to know who to allow to give input and who to allow to listen to that input. So I think it should be interesting. I'm just say that, I don't want to go too much into it. I bring my points out as we continue. But the who is important, and that's all I got. You are muted, sister. We don't hear you. Oh, Zebulon or Isaiah.
Somebody else to say something. I was trying to point.
Okay.
Oh, no, I was. It looked like brother Isaiah wanted to lay out a platform. That's why I just kind of no.
The man setting the mood. He comes in talking smooth. Now he's setting the lights, dimming the lights. Man, I'm telling you, bro. Go ahead.
Close the door.
Close the door. All right, man.
But
No, I'm just having a few technical difficulties over here. I'm just trying to get stuff straight.
Nah, it's all good, brother. It's all good, man. But yeah, it's as last night, when I was considering the subject for today, I was kind of in the same vein as Ak Shema, as far as I think one of the most important elements is the who. Who are we allowing to get inside of our heads? Whether it's the husband, wife, whoever, but who is the one? And then of course you have to look. There's a lot of different variables, which obviously during the course of this of this topic or whatever, we're going to be kind of obviously touching on them. But I wanted to just start off with saying that I don't think the issue of getting outside advice is a bad thing. One of the reasons why I say that is just from a scriptural standpoint. One of my favorites is Proverbs 11:14, where it says Be'ein takbulot dipa alam watishua berab yoetz, and in the English it says that for lack of guidance a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. Now of course,
I love that verse.
If I say that with the caveat that, again, we have to always consider not that there's an issue with advisors, but it is the type of advisor. Now, of course, we can pull up other scripts where it tells us that we have to be circumspect in how we go and whatever. But generally speaking, any type of relationship, whether it's an interrelationship, whether it's war, anything you can think of, you have to have advisors, because when you don't have advisors, you're assuming that you and the other party, let's say it's your wife or whatever, you're assuming that you and her know everything there is to know about relationships. Now, for me, that's a very bad assumption, because many of us don't know, especially if you've only been married, let's say you've only been married a year, there's actually, you have no point of reference experience-wise to draw from. There's no well. You're going to a well and there's nothing in there. So since there's nothing there, you have to, of course, consult with others. Well, who else is married? Who else has gone through these things? Now, that doesn't mean that everything that is brought to you, that you take it and say, I'm going to utilize it, but it is just to give you a more broader, well, to drink from. To say, okay, I have all of this now we have all of this at our disposal. Now we can pick and say, okay, what will work for us, so on and so forth. So I think the problem is not, like Brother Shema said, the problem is not necessarily in the advisors, but it is in the type of advisors. And I'll just leave that, and we can go on afterwards. Next up.
All right. Y'all both pretty much laid out my whole premise on the matter. We actually talked about this before we got on the video platform when we were still using Blog Talk. In a different conversation, but we briefly touched on it, dealing with throwing messages outside of the relationship to see what type of advice you get back and everything. And I agree. I think it's dope to consider what other people have to say, but the ideal is using righteous counsel, and there's a few different scriptures that talks about seeking wise counsel, to kind of deliberate. Is that the right word? To kind of set yourself up in a way that you can become prosperous, whatever you're doing. Y'all can't hear me?
Loud and clear, Aki.
Okay.
Finally. I'm sorry, man. Go ahead. I was not messing with you, man. I'm done. That's it.
Keep them coming. I blue skidoo through the computer. But now, y'all hit it pretty much on the head. I don't think there's a issue with that, with using that, but you have to be careful who you are inviting and how long you allow them to stay. And I guess that'll be
that one deep. I like the last one
that we can have throughout this video.
I like that last part you said.
Yeah.
So he gonna say the yeah. Like, see, you was doing so good until you just said that yeah, bro. He said yeah.
You know what? All right, man. I'm gonna mute my mic.
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree about the whole wise counsel too, which is something I wasn't thinking of. Well, I kind of thought about it for a hot second, but I do think that there is something to humility when it comes to trying to figure out ways to resolve things. But we know the book talks about it's the steps to that though, so it's not like Isaiah, you said, you listen to people, but then it's not like forever listening to them, or it's protocol for everything. But that's why I'm glad we're talking about this, because we don't. I hope I can speak for all of us. I do that a lot, and I apologize if there's anything I'm saying that you don't necessarily agree with individually. But I would say collectively, it's always good for us to hash through these things. A lot of stuff we think we know, we don't really know, and so and I think that going back to the initial reason for the show, shout out to Shamar who came up with the whole idea of the platform, is that we obviously are failing. So it can't be that like, I personally think as a relatively young person that everything I know is way better than the elders. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a give and take, I think, on both ends. And I think that it benefits us to not only consider how we can do things, I guess air quote, differently, but we can't do those things without some kind of foundation in which to start on and build upon. So, because a lot of stuff that we learn is bad advice, but everything ain't bad advice. Like, people say stuff like, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I still understand that where that idiom came from. It's the weirdest thing ever, but I do understand, I guess, like, don't get rid of everything. Some parts of it is still good. So I did want to ask the first question I wanted to ask was the media. For some reason, that stuck in my brain as something, because we talk about this a lot on the show, how we mimic the characteristics of other people, or even like the media's portrayal of who we are as a people. So I'm just curious to see what y'all think. What role does that play when it comes to managing conflict? So in this situation, the media would be the us. So how do you address your wife, for example? You all have a disagreement, or there's conflict between you two, and the way she comes to you to address it is, snapping her fingers and doing all this. I mean, how do you deal with that as an added layer on top of conflict?
What they call that the sister girl approach.
Right.
like doing all of that extra stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So I think it's a role, like what role does that play on top of something that you're already dealing with? That's the first question I think I would talk about.
I guess we could go in the same order if y'all cool with it.
Yeah.
I want to say first and foremost that for me, I probably wouldn't even be with a woman like that. So I probably wouldn't have that problem when I was younger, maybe. But like if you asking me specifically, me, how would I deal with that? I wouldn't have to deal with it because the next woman I choose, I'm going to be wise in my choosing, and I think that we should approach each other just level-headed. I know it's not always going to be that. I guess I feel it could, but I'm just going to be, I guess, like what the general consensus would say. They would say it's going to happen one day. I don't think it has to, but if it does, I just be like, hey, let's take a moment and come back and revisit whatever we're dealing with. That's the best approach I can say, I guess, to just give you an answer. That's me. So I got.
Yeah, it's a lot that goes along with the whole issue of media. I mean, we could probably spend 2-3 hours just on the intent of media and the damage that it has done. But I'll just say this, that I think any time, and all of this obviously is worked out in the courting stage of any relationship, where you come to the understanding that, hey, listen, TMZ and Maury and all that is the goddamn devil. That is the devil. Let's be very clear on that. Now that we're clear that is the devil, we don't have to worry about TMZ infiltrating our perception of how our relationship is going to move. We don't have to worry about what Maury says. We don't have to worry about all of these obviously evil trolls that are coming in to destroy whatever relationships that we have. One of the things that we have to remember is that there's no market for successful relationships in this kingdom.
That's a good point. That's an excellent point.
I mean, you have to remember, right? I mean, it's a capitalist society. We got to remember that about the Western world, especially America. It's a capitalist society. So therefore, if they cannot capitalize on something, if something has no long-term capital value, then there's no investment. Why invest in something that has no value to your core ethics? I mean, think about this. We live in a place in which adultery is not only not a crime, but in a certain context, it's something to be applauded. I mean, think about it. I mean, adultery is applauded in this kingdom. Now, we may not want to use that word because it just sounds bad, but the actions, if I'm a man and I have a situation with my wife and I decide, you know what, I'm going to step out on her. I'm going to go get this girl here. I'm going to go get this lady. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing me. There's a certain false sense of machismo that comes with that. Like, I was able to bag her. I was able to bag that or whatever like that. And you know what? Yeah, my wife, she knows about it and she got to handle that. There's a certain braggadocio element to that. And it's also the same thing in reverse. You got women who will who will step out on the relationship and will do them and be like, hey, listen, I'm just exercising my rights. I'm a woman, and I if I want another man, I can do that. There's a certain celebratory nature to these type of events. If it wasn't, shows like Housewives and Love and Hip Hop, all of those shows wouldn't even be successful. They would have failed in the first 2 episodes. But there's a reason why they've been on the air 10, 15 years, because again, the society that we live in, it celebrates dysfunction. I'll give you a quick example. Has anybody watched the reality show Meet the Peeps?
No, I haven't, man.
Mm-mm.
I have. Great show. Excellent reality show. It's, with Roddy Pete, Holly Pete, and their children. But the show, when it was on OWN, it didn't get a lot of, it didn't have a lot of good ratings. And they end up moving the show, starting a whole nother show on, I think, Hallmark, the Hallmark channel of all places. Like, who watches the Hallmark channel? Whatever. But they moved it there. And one of the reasons why we saw the failure of that show is because the show encompasses certain morals. There's a certain high moral value. Functional marriages is celebrated in the show. Children being obedient to the wisdom of their parents is celebrated. Listening to the wisdom of the matriarch, the grandmother who's also in the show, these things are celebrated. So all of the elements of that show that's celebrated in the show, it could not work on BET. That model can't work on any of these stations because there's no dysfunction. No dysfunction is being showed in the show. So now you're like, well, how are we going to market this? And that's why OWN said, yeah, we don't know what to do with this, with this show. It's too much, there's too much function being displayed. You can't sell function to dysfunctional people.
You know what's crazy, real quick, if you allow me to jump in? When you just brought that up, it made me think about the Cosby Show. How we get away with the Cosby Show? That's kind of weird. Like, I'm like, man, well, you know what? That's a show though. That's not a reality show. Okay, never mind. I recant that statement.
No, it kind of goes right back into that same point that the Cosby Show was an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like it had ever been seen. So anytime you have an anomaly, the first time it's shown, it's like, whoa, there's a shock value to the Cosby Show.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the Cosby Show has some issues that I personally have with the show, I love the show. I mean, it's one of the greatest examples of, generally of Black functionality, whatever. Although it has its little questionable elements to it or whatever, but it's one of the best things that we're probably ever going to see on TV, ever, going forward. But again, that was a different time period. This was a time that was the time period that was just coming out of the Black Panther era, the consciousness. There was a small market that was developing for something like the Cosby Show to springboard off of. Same thing with shows like growing up, we used to just call it the Urkel Show. Family Matters. Whatever, the Urkel Show. But it was the same thing with that. That aside from Urkel, that was a very functional family. You had a father who had a major presence in the role of his family. The mother, she was not passive, just like, oh, she wasn't no Edith Bunker. She was strong Black woman, but also understanding that Carl was the man of the house. Like, there was plenty of function in that household. So that was the era in which those type of shows could blossom. To the point where the only dysfunctional family that was on TV in the 80s and 90s was Married with Children, and that was a white show.
Yeah, exactly, that's a good point. It sure was.
You didn't see dysfunctional Black families at that time, and even they might be poor, whatever like that, like in good times, but you didn't see, there was no dysfunction where it was just everybody was just tossed up and just jacked up. You didn't start seeing that until the late 90s, going into the 2000s,
right,
when the consciousness begins to shift. And now you're like, well, functionality doesn't work because it's boring. I mean, how long can you talk about a loving wife and a loving husband? It's not marketable, but we can always market dysfunction, because there's always new levels of dysfunction that you can that you can investigate. That's why all of these shows continue to flourish. Why Tyler Perry made an entire career off of the dysfunction of the Black family.
Yep, and we praised them for it. I ain't gonna lie, I was one of the ones. It was funny, but now when I look at it, I be like, man, that's It's not as funny anymore to me.
And that's not to say that Tyler Perry didn't have his good moments. I mean, he has plenty of movies that had nothing to do with Medea that were actually very good movies. And it was like, okay, no doubt, that's good. Like Good Deeds and things like
Good
that.
Deeds, good, yeah.
Excellent movie. But generally, he made a career off of the dysfunction, and mostly to the much to the chagrin of the black male. It was mostly to his detriment. So again, but this is the we live in a culture that celebrates it. That's why positivity only lasts for pocket periods of time. But ratchetness and thougtism and niggerisms can live on and on and on and on because there's a market for it. And we learned that from our white gods, the slave owners, the people who brought us over here. They were the picture image of dysfunction, and we inherited the dysfunction from their dysfunction, and now they're like, hey, they're made, we are gods, and they are now made in our image, after our likeness. Now we can market their dysfunction, because who knows dysfunction better than the creator of it?
Wow.
I'm rambling now, but that's my platform.
I have to say, mind blown. Okay, where's the little emoji with the smoke at the top of it? Yeah, I jumped in front of Isaiah. I apologize. Just real quick, I wanted to just to comment on that, just with the media, as far as you're right. I'm sitting here thinking like there ain't no TV shows. Like even the stuff I think I watched as lightweight, it ain't good, but it ain't bad. Like you mentioned Hallmark Channel. There's a show that I think is still kind of like soft, but even in that show, you don't have like a lot of sex or like a lot of like nudity. Ain't no cussing. However, can't nobody be happy. So once somebody finds somebody, then it's like, oh, they cool, and then such start cheating on them, or such is cool, but then they got all these insecurities. So you're right. I mean, even in TV shows that are relatively calm, there is an angst in that. So it's like we cool, but we can't be too cool, because then everybody's bored by that. And also, just a real quick about the comment about the people that that were our captives when we came to this country. When I was working at Johns Hopkins, right, in Baltimore, I used to work for the Sheridan Libraries and University Museums, which is basically the libraries and museums. But we had two historic houses on campus. One of them is called Homewood. So I'm just saying this stuff because for people who might want to go visit the museum, but it's called Homewood Museum. It was the house of one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. I think his last name was Carroll, but it was like the daddy, the signer of the Declaration of Independence, gave that house to his son. Now his son was a raging alcoholic, was abusing his wife. There was even rumors that he had raped one of the sisters, the black women, the slaves in there. But it was funny because before that, I mean, they was already kind of doing tours around that. More recently, they started to unveil the stories of the enslaved, so now you have the Black voice in the house. But before that, there was a lot of conversation just on that narrative. I mean, they still to this day do tours, and that's the thing that you hear is that he was an alcoholic, abusive, and he couldn't keep the house. He was misusing the funds, so because he was rich, he kind of took the money that was given to him and like pissed it off or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Right. So that's true. That's true. And I always want to point that out because that bothers me too. Just the things that we also this earlier, the things that we learn, we have to always remember that we have learned them from the people around us. It's not to say necessarily, because my personal opinion is they bad, but we just as bad as we copy them. Mm-hmm. But just for sake of argument, we do learn a lot of stuff from people around us, and so as we work to become more, to go back, I can say more, because I think we should turn back around, go the other way. But as we work to go back to the beginning or to the foundation, which we believe on this show is the Torah, okay. We have to be able to acknowledge those parts of ourselves that are a product of our being in this country. And it's not to shame nobody or to point fingers. I think we spend a lot of time pointing the finger at other people, but still, okay, now we point the finger. We understand where we got it from. Now what you going to do?
Right.
Because it's still, just to your point about the God situation, this is the last thing I'll say about the God thing, because I don't want to ramble either. But, you know, we so-called conscious people say, oh, you know, Black people, we powerful and blah, blah, blah. And we against white supremacy. But in the same vein, we keep saying, well, they did this to us and they did that. So yeah, the white man is God. Because you give him all this power. You know what I'm saying? So I do think there's something to acknowledge in there, but after you acknowledge it, then what you're gonna do, especially because like I said on this show, we having a conversation about conflict. And when you in your house and it's just you and your family, you can't keep blaming somebody outside of it. At some point the responsibility falls in either both people, or either, however, it's up to us to reclaim our houses and reclaim our families and stuff. So I think Isaiah, did you want to say something? I see you walked away. I'm gonna be quiet. But thank you for that, Zebulon. I appreciate it. That was a good word.
All praise to the Most High.
All right, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. I'm back now. So Zeb, you made a great point, man. And just doubling on what Tamar had added in. You know, I'm looking back and you know, looking at shows like even the so-called shows that are built to uplift you know, various communities and whatnot. You always see there's I don't want to necessarily say always an extreme level of dysfunction, but there has to be that hot button issue that's always touched upon.
Right.
Something to lead you through. Whether it's on an extreme case dealing with like the Empire show, which has been given accolades, you know, all over, you know what I mean? But that show has not only switched genres, but it's kind of even morphed from what it was supposed to be about, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the celebration of music takes this backseat to the aspect of mystery that's involved with it. But I'm going back to what we were talking about with media. And in my opinion, this would be an example of not getting wise counsel. I know touching on the point that Shema made last week, saying, you know, you sitting up with a friend or whatever, you know, you guys are watching a show together, and the next question is, how would you deal with that situation? Right, and allowing that to open up a level of dialogue. Now, that would be good in a sense because it introduces you to something, and you get to kind of course through your mind and see what will be your best response or your best reaction to whatever that was. But 9 times out of 10, what that was is something extreme and, you know, out of touch. I don't want to say necessarily out of touch with reality, but it's like the question that you're asking is like, well, why would we even be involved in it?
So like the scenario that people say, if you were the last person on earth, whatever, and the only thing that you had to eat was pig, would you eat it? It's like one of those types of like.
And my response is always, well, you know, it's not unhealthy to eat grass and dandelions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but
right.
The point is, I'll give you another example. Watching the Love and Hip Hop show, right? I don't know what season they on, nor do I know any of the people. But it was the young Jock, I believe it was, and no, not Young Jock. I'm sorry. Stevie J, dude that used to be a producer for Biggie. He had like 2 females or whatever, and then had another female on the other side or whatever. Meanwhile, you know, having a custody battle, I believe, or something like that. And it's like, damn, this is all we see when we see our people. So much so that I've been to other places, and the first thing I'm asked is, oh, like in New Jersey, there was the Jersey Shore show, you know, and that's the ideal of what people think New Jersey people act like.
Right.
And I'm like, no, not at all.
It's worse than that.
First of all, none of them people on that show was even from New Jersey.
Yeah. Wow.
Secondly, you know, so I've been in places where people think that you would react the way they see people on TV reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there is no more unbiased depiction of being so-called black, or you know, being so-called conscious, or whatever categories you want to put yourself in. So there is no aspect of that on TV in a good light. It's always, I'm the pro health brother, but I'm still out here selling drugs to get by.
Right.
Or something crazy, like the narrative has to be extremely crazy. So when you're looking at these different shows that deal with so-called blacks in relationships, and only thing you see is negativity.
Right.
When that's hit, the only thing you could sit there and comment on was negativity. For instance, back in the day, we talked about the Cosby Show, you know, and this is no relation to what he did or didn't do.
Right.
But we look at his personal life. But when we look at that show, we see a nucleus with a husband and a wife who sat down every night and talked about how they was going to handle their children.
Mm.
And sat there and did that, and then spoke on the outcomes with the kids. I can remember a number of occasions on that show where they had family discussions, or this is what we wanted to do, and this is why we did it this way. And they never let the aspect of work interfere with their relationship with their kids.
That's right.
Whether, you know, that's a true depiction of what work life is like as a doctor and a lawyer or not. The ideal was there's still an odence to we taking care of our kids.
That's right.
Right. So even going back to Tamar's first part of the conversation of how would you deal with a woman who's coming to you in a way that we see depicted in all of these TV shows, aggressive, fighting, angry, you know what I mean? Maybe that's all they know. But I can't say, like what Shema said, I never deal with a person, or I won't be in a situation with a person like that, because, you know, we talking about friendships as well. So at least I am at this point. So you never know, you know, how you can, you know, the light can be shown, or some type of alteration to their personality can be made just through being you being a benefit. So with that being said, a lot of times I can't say that. I have now put into practice the aspect of, and this is something I actually talked to my brother about. If you're feeling disrespected, let them know I feel disrespected when you do this. So when you talk to me in this tone and this nature with this body language, it bothers me. So let them know what that trigger is. This way, it can be a point where that aggression can be diffused, or if they don't want to, you know, a sign that they're not really heeding who you are as a person, and maybe whatever aspect of your relationship might need to change, where you separate yourself, or you continuously let them know this is how I expect you to deal with me. So
good point.
I'm gonna go ahead and you know, mute my mic back. But if y'all wanted to say something, we can touch on it.
I'm gonna jump in real quick, y'all, and then I want to bring it back somewhere. I don't know if Tamar had another question. By the way, man, I would love to get some extra or other. I just went into the live feed and I was telling them that, you know, if anybody want to jump in, let us know. You know, love to get probably another woman or two. I don't know how Tamar be feeling being the only one there, and it's like 3 males.
I'm so used to it. I got a house full of boys, and
okay,
you know, I'm used to it. Yeah, but I would love to hear some more sisters, though. That's
what I'm saying. That's we need that, and honestly, people that might observe us or whatever, they might like what we say and things like that. But, sometimes people be like, well, it's all men. That's all it is in the community. And I don't like that. So I want to really try to figure out a way to bring more sisters on. But what I will say is this. I want to comment on what Isaiah was saying. As far as for me, when I was pointing out the whole me not putting myself in this situation, it was more so in regards to when I, just for clarity's sake, for those who's listening, actually become have a partner, actually in a relationship. We won't be like that. I can confidently say that, because the next person I pick, when I do pick them, when we are together, all that stuff gonna be hashed out in the beginning.
I got you. So basically, a culmination of all the lessons we talked about and these other shows and stuff, kind of putting them together. I feel
yeah, everything will be hashed out in the beginning. Instead of like when it happens, tell them, I'm telling them before it happens.
Right.
Like we're going to be speaking with each other, bringing out scenarios like you just brought out, asking questions dealing with how would you deal with this? How would you operate in this? I have a list right now. I'm gonna pull it up and I'm gonna put it in the Facebook thing. This little psychology today. I got it literally on my computer. So if I do end up courting somebody, these are some questions I'm gonna ask. I like the questions that this person put out. I want y'all to check it out and then comment on it later. I don't know why it's doing this. I'm trying to. Okay, there we are. All right, so I'm gonna put it in the group. But my point is, I ask these questions in the beginning. I tell them, what are some things? The questions people ask. What's some things that interest you? What are some things that's some turnoffs? What's some things that how would you operate? You gotta ask a lot of questions. We don't do that. A lot of us don't. I know I didn't in my past relationships. So I can only imagine if I didn't. I know a lot of other people didn't. So the next person that I'm with and end up with and decide to be with, I really believe that will not happen. I've seen it done before, actually. I've been friends with a couple that for 17 years, and maybe they did it behind closed doors or whatever. I'm sure, but maybe they didn't. So I actually talked to the man that's been with this woman. He said we really never had that, but we hashed it out all in the beginning. He's actually a mentor of mine, actually a year younger than me too. But he was like, these are a lot of things that we need to do in the beginning. Now going back into what Zebulon said, he brought out something. I want to try to say this just in case somebody do listen or was listening. And I just found this out myself, More. I don't know if you know about this. Maybe you have. But they actually do have a law against adultery. But it's not being promoted. It's not being pushed. It's like, and I didn't know that. I found this out like a month ago. Like literally, it's a penalty for adultery. But it's not in different certain states, or maybe all states, I don't know, but it's not enforced. And I think that's what goes with your point, what you was bringing out too. But for those that were like, man, it is one, I just want to throw it out there. We do know it is one, but I think what he was more putting on, it's not enforced. It's nothing, you know what I'm saying? It's not enforced. Last thing I want to say I'm going way back when Tamar was bringing something out. I want to ask y'all a question. Y'all got to answer it, or you do. I mean, you don't have to answer it, or you can. So Tamar, I want everyone to tell me what it is that you all do to bring in income. It could be a small title, or it could be a major title, whatever you want to say. And it's a point I'm about to make right now. So Tamar, More Zebulon, Isaiah, what field are you in or a part of? It could be one source of income that you do to bring in income. And it's a point I'm about to make right now.
Yeah, I'm a fundraiser / grant writer.
So you're a grant writer, you said, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Zebulon.
Wow, I don't even know if I could follow up after that one. Counselor by trade, but as far as functionality, I do web design now. Design websites.
So you're a creator, you're a grantor. Isaiah, what is it that you do?
Real short and sweet. I teach your basic computer needs and skills to
Okay.
children and adults.
Okay, cool. So you have a grant writer, you have a creator, basically, because web development is not easy for those that might not know. And you have a teacher dealing with computer science, I want to say, basically.
Computer science might be a little strong, but
Okay.
on the lower end.
Okay, so we got those
Okay.
three. And then myself, the main source of income is machine specialist. Here's the point I'm about to make. When dealing with, like, just say that I got something going on in my life, and I have to pick. Remember, we was talking about, I'm going right back to the beginning now, who you choose. So when we come in for relationship advice or to bring something to somebody so they can help you advice, I can't come to More Zebulon talking about asking advice when dealing with grants, and that's not his specialty. That's not something he's successful in. That's not something that he has a history of thriving in. I can't come to Sister Achoti Tamar with computer science, and she is not teaching children and adults things concerning with computer science on the low end, like he said. Somebody can't come to, Zebulon. Well, maybe he do have a history of this, I don't know, and know how to, put wheels on tractors or, stuff dealing with forklifts and all that stuff. My point is this: a lot of times, or a lot of failures, when we going to other people outside sources, we're going to people that have not even dealt with the problem. It's not their specialty. The problem is, it's not their specialty. They're not really masters in this specific subject. So going back to the wise counsel, the counsel or the people that you're going to, they need to be seasoned in this in some aspect, whether it's they were seasoned in it and they failed, but they learned from it and now they're succeeding. Because I'm not going to go to someone that just keep failing too, by the way. You know what I'm saying? So I used you all as an example to show how it kind of is when the women and or men go to our friends with certain problems that they have never even dealt with, but they're giving us advice on it. And that's not doing anything to help the unit or the family or the home. So it's good for us to go out, but we need to find those that are seasoned and they want you to succeed. Seasoned and they want you to succeed. Go out, talk to someone that is seasoned in the subject and they want you to succeed collectively, both of you. And that's the problem in our community. We're not going to people who are seasoned in the particular subject and want you to succeed. That's it.
If I may, I can't really offer no argument against that. I mean, that's sound. But I will say this though, that even with that, there's still shades of that. Because for instance, for me, I would consult. Let's say if we're talking about marriage, I would equally consult a person who's had multiple failed marriages, the same as I would want to hear the wisdom of someone who has no failed marriages. The reason why I would take someone who has no failed marriages because now you get to see the function of a marriage in its purity, like to find out what makes the marriage work, and you're able to get wisdom from that. Like, okay, they do this, they do that. That's good. Maybe I can implement that in what I'm doing. Now, the person who has multiple failures, on the surface, yeah, you're like, well, what can I get from you? Obviously, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Clearly, you don't know what you're doing. But But even that has to be questioned, because even with that, you could still say, well, this person has had 3, 4, 5 failed marriages. Let me pick their brain to find out what caused the demise of these marriages. Because even that is wisdom. Because now I can say, oh, okay, this first marriage, you committed adultery. Okay, the second marriage, you were whatever, whatever. And all of these different things, oh, he was extremely argumentative. She was overbearing, and all of these different things. So even from failure, you can learn a lot on how to be successful, because now you know what you don't, what you clearly don't need to do. Years ago, when I used to do counseling, and because like I said, by trade, I'm a counselor, and I worked when I was in New York. I worked in this battered women's shelter called Providence House in Brooklyn, and I love that job. But anyway, not gonna go into whatever. But it was excellent job, and you get a chance to, like, every day to interact with, not, I mean, there were some battered women there, but it was mainly single mother type of place. It was whatever. Some of them were battered, some of them were just, they needed a place, to go after their man left, or whatever the case. But you had a lot of, single mothers there with children or whatever. And one of the things, one of the classes that we taught, aside from mock job interviews, budgeting and finance and things of that nature, one of the things that we taught was about drug addiction. And one of the things, and one of the platforms that I constantly pushed is that the best advice that you can get about drug addiction and the ramifications of it is through drug addicts. We would bring in someone who was currently on drugs, current drug users. And one of the techniques that I used was to say, okay, I'm here, I'm a counselor. This person is, here we are in the year 2008, and they're still smoking crack. Like, crack is like a 80s drug, 80s and early 90s drug. Like, why are we in 2008? We're still smoking crack?
Thank you. I've been saying that. Who still smokes crack?
Right. Like, who does that? And so, right. Who still does this nonsense? But we would bring drug addicts, alcoholics, or whatever into the class, because it was a classroom type of forum, and we would bring them in, and I would pose this question to them: that, listen, I'm a counselor. I also have drug counseling experience behind under my belt, but if I'm telling you about why you should not use drugs and so on and so forth, and that drugs are horrible and they'll destroy your life, now what I'm saying is true. But whose words hold more weight? The person who has never indulged or has never been ravaged by the usage of drugs, or the person who can now speak in the first person and say, listen, do not smoke crack. Look at me. I'm twisted. This is why you stay away from crack. Now, and so depending on the person's vantage point, and that's why I say that what Brother Shammai said is actual fact, but again, depending on the angle, sometimes you may want to actually go to a person who has failed marriages, because now you get to see the uncut raw, the dark side of marriage. A lot of times when we talk about marriages, a lot of people who have successful marriages, they only give you the good.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they have no experience. And going back to what Brother Shammai said, someone who's experienced in that field, if you have no experience in failure, then you can't speak on failure, because you have no point of reference. It's like you see what I'm saying, or a person who has nothing but failure, you may not be able to extract anything from them about how to succeed, because they have no experience in succeeding. But the one thing that we can get from all of them is that all of them have something to offer to the marriage. I want to hear people's positive experiences in marriage, their successes. I want to talk to older people who've been married 40, 50, 60 years and say, how have you been able to be interested in somebody for 60 years? Like, how does that work? You know what I'm saying? I want to hear that. But then I'm also you know, we're all, and I think we can, I can speak for all of us. We're none of us are, you know, are that, you know, of that single-minded where we don't acknowledge that there's dark sides to marriages. So we would also want to hear, I want to hear marriage advice from, let's say, like a person like Steve Harvey. Why? Because all you do is fail. Let me know why you're failing, because I can learn from that. So like, okay, yeah, in the future, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. Okay, I'm not gonna do the simp thing. You know, I'm not gonna simp. Let me go over here and avoid that. So so again, I agree with what Shema saying. What it's saying, that is sound doctrine, if I can use that term. You know, that's sound doctrine. But even in areas of like with people who may not have certain experience in a field, the one thing you can extract from them is a non-biased approach. A lot of times when we have something invested in something, we tend to be biased. So like, for instance, a person who has 12, 16 years of training to be a doctor, they have all this experience. They don't want someone to come along and say, listen, I'm not taking your drugs or your vaccines because this is of the damn devil. They're biased because their training says that what I know is the truth. I'm not going to sit here and tell you something contrary to what I know to be true. So even with experience, there's the possibility of bias because they're only going to show you what they know to be true. Their chances are they're not going to give you the opposite. They might, but they're going to focus more on, like Brother Shema said, they're going to focus more on what they have been successful at. Like, I'm successful at dispensing drugs. I'm not in the business of telling someone to go get herbal type of medication because that's not what I do. So I just think that even with people who are not experienced, you know, that we know, and of course, you know, we have to, like Shema said, we got to kind of take their word with a grain of salt, but we can still take their word and say, I can use your inexperience to show me what I need to be doing, because I'm also inexperienced. If I've only been married for 2-3 years, I don't know nothing about marriage yet. How can you? You haven't been around the block long enough to say, I know this, or I know that and that. So you have to be able to extract from all sources. But like Shema and Brother Isaiah said, you have to be able to know not only who is giving you this information, but what is their background? What are their motives? I think it was Isaiah, it may have been both of the brothers who talked about the motive. I think Ben Sirach even talks about that you know, you have to be careful because some people give advice, not necessarily to help you, but to just say, you know what, let me just see how that's going to pan out. And they'll step back and say, okay, let me see how that's going to pan out for them. You have some people that use us as test dummies. Like, I don't know if that's going to work or not. You know what, let me just give this information to Sister Tamar. Let her put that in motion. Let me just sit back and see if it works or not. So we have to be circumspect, you know, going back again with the agreement that I have, you know, with Brother Shema and Isaiah, we have to be able to extract from all these sources, but be very, very circumspect in the background of the people who are giving it. Because some people, like he said, some people don't want you to succeed in your marriage. And I've seen people give advice, and I've seen it like in personal experience, I've seen people that already have, they might not even like your spouse. So if you go and, you know, you ask this person like for advice, like, hey, listen, man, I'm going through some things with my wife, or hey, I'm going through some things with my husband. The sister might be, you know, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you, you know, Tamar, I ain't like Ak anyway, you know, I don't think he's yada, 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 you know. And then you're like, yeah, he does do that. She's like, yeah, see, that was me. I would have never had him. I would have never. And now she's already got in your head. Now you're like, yeah, he is a lame, you know.
Right.
But her motive was never to help you reconcile your marriage. Her motive is, you know what? I'm kind of bitter right now, and she should be bitter right along with me. So you know what? I'm gonna put that in her head. And you got brothers that'll put that in. Brothers that like, yeah, man, I tried to tell you, man, she's a whore, man. I'm telling you. tell me she's a whore. You might not see it all the way now, but I'm telling you, I don't trust her.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So yeah, it's like the brother said, you have to be circumspect in anything you get from anybody because it's like Shema said, motive.
So what I want to come in and say real quick, and I'll be real quick. What I really meant, because I'm glad he brought it out more so I can expound. When I say experience and wants you to succeed, I think that wants you to succeed part is what I really was expounding on. So
Got you.
the experience could be going through the subject you went through, and or like you said, someone that's failed in 3 or 4 marriages. But here's the key part. That's why I left the last part for the last thing to be said. Wants you to succeed. Somebody could have 4 marriages if they fail, and then they think that all marriages is horrible.
Right.
And you're trying to succeed in yours. So even with the doctor, perfect example. You know what I'm saying? Bias, a lot of bias. You know, I don't know if you all remember me talking about my cousin and his wife, and they said to me that if anything goes wrong with them and stuff like that, she told her husband, my cousin, I only want you to talk to Shema. And the reason she said that, and this is her words, not mine, is because I don't take sides from either one of them. I want both of them to succeed. You know what I'm saying? Even if I haven't been through what they're going through,
right?
You know, we all have some type of speck of what's happening, but I want them to succeed. So when I use the example of you all had different job titles and stuff, then people are really not dealing with. So it's like, yeah, I need to go to Chief Zebulon when it's dealing with web development and things like that. That's a particular subject. Sure, I need to go with him. But what I'm ultimately saying is, a lot of times when we're going out to these people with advice, is there, like you just said, motive for us to succeed? You know,
absolutely.
So that's my major thing. Maybe I should just lay it off with that, and I because we both made some great points. But I want to let the audience that might listen to it later to understand what I'm really trying to say is, you have to speak with someone that wants you to see. If somebody wants you to succeed, they would never be biased. That's just my take. I don't know everybody. I don't know how everybody think. But if someone wants both of you to succeed, they will not be biased from a standpoint of like, you know what, yeah, you're right. They only saying you right. They're going to try to figure out what is it that possibly, maybe you did something to kind of like spark it. Maybe you didn't, but they're going to continue to try to figure it out. They're going to ask you so many questions on you first, or second, but still because they want to really gather all the information and then try to help both of you. So that's why I guess that's why I should have just said that, just wants you to succeed. That's my point, I guess,
Oh, no, you didn't say, I can't. You didn't say, like I said, there was nothing to refute. It was just, I only wanted to just kind of take one of the elements and just kind of go a little further with it, but not. I know, I understood what you said. That's why I said there's nothing to argue there.
Yeah, no, just for the listeners, I just want them to understand that I'm saying, like, I want, I think the key in all of this is because we hear it, like you said, something about them taking sides and being biased, and we all witness that. We'll be talking to somebody and be there, be like, man, girl, you know what, you right, or like you just said, yeah, I didn't really like him to begin with, or I didn't really like her to begin with. Okay, well, you're not somebody I want to talk to. I need someone that wants us to succeed. If he ain't or she not doing no harm, bodily harm to me, she or him is not trying to tear me down mentally or do anything harmful, then guess what? I can't talk to you. I need to talk to someone else.
Right.
Because he or she is not doing none of those things, so I really want somebody that want us to succeed.
Right.
Never cheated on me, loyal to me. It's just we're going through a lot of hell right now. So I want somebody that's gonna really break this down and bring us back to a nice common ground. I won't say heaven. I was gonna say heaven, but to a place where I saw your head look like that. Take about you tip to the left, like, well, I kind of do whatever.
Yeah.
That's
So,
my point, though.
yeah, that's good. I also just wanted to say too about just one last point on that I wanted to bring up at the other side too is we're talking about bringing in people's perspective. Also, just real quick. So with the whole wanting people to see us succeed. Also, just to add to that, also picking somebody who's just a middle ground person, period, because they may like those people. I feel like they may or may not want you to succeed, but that's kind of like irrelevant because some people don't want nobody to be happy, but they might be somebody who is still able to see things balanced, like what I'm saying. So I'll just say that just to add on to what y'all was saying, because we can't really tell how somebody feels when you can't tell how people feel about you, but sometimes people be smiling in your face and they come to the left with something crazy. Like, what? I thought you loved me. So, okay.
You see how I talk before you go forward. You see how our topics, like, we'll be talking about something, and there's so many layers to it.
Yeah, all the time.
It's like, it's like, boom, man, she just brought something else out, and then that's the perfect thing she brought out. And then I will want to add to that. And I'm gonna say this one thing I want to add to it. I'm done. I promise. I'm sorry. I just want to say that this all goes back to like what Isaiah said earlier. He's like, oh, Shema, you trying to bring everything to it. I think he said something like that because, I forgot what I was talking about, what he had said, like you bring in the past conversations. So my point is bringing him out of saying that was, I think that it goes back to initially knowing who we're dealing with. So if we're knowing who we're dealing with, kind of like what I said, my cousins know about me, they know, okay, he's not going to be biased. He's going to tell us if we're wrong or right. But he's not, he's saying it because he wants us to succeed. So when I'm saying I want us to succeed, I think that you're talking about somebody that's like correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, like say if somebody that don't know neither one of you.
Exactly, yeah.
And they can look at the situation from the outside as though they're not in the inside. Right. I think that's a perfect thing you brought out, and I think we should have that. But I honestly think if we pick the right people, the people we pick should have that in them. Maybe I don't know if y'all agree with me or disagree. Like maybe you all do or don't feel that people could do that, but I do. I think that it is people out there that can be like that neutral person you're talking about, but still want success.
Right.
That's all I got.
So just speaking in the same vein that we talked about, we were just talking about how if we go out to seek counsel from other people, but what do we do when people just come up to us and tell us how they feel about our relationships? I'm really burning to discuss that because that happens a lot for those people who have been married. Like when people when these same loved ones, because let's just say that we went out and we asked somebody to give us advice, right, on our relationship. Now we open a door for them to come and tell us every thought that they could potentially have about our union. So we open the door. Now we can't close the door because grandma foot in the door. Like I'm not closing the door. I'm here.
Right.
So what do and that sounds real sexist just now. I apologize. Maybe granddaddy's nosy. I'm trying not to be a sexist. I apologize. So what do we do then now that we have people who are loved ones, physical family members, in-laws, friends that we know? What do we do when they start to bring up things to us that are not a conflict, but now that they voices in the middle of us, now it's me, you, y'all, and they voice, and we all have a conversation about what's best for us. You know what I'm saying? So what do we do then? Well, how would you handle that, rather? So whoever wants to jump in with that.
All right.
I'll go last.
Okay. So I'm going to say something real quick on that note because it happens a lot.
Right.
The people's that in some cases the people don't even necessarily mean to be that in your relationship. Like they just think that they're helping. But the saying goes, the rule.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. It might just be me, but if you could speak up a little bit, because my ears is older than it was last week.
Teddy Pendergrass.
Thanks.
Older than last week, huh?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ezzy.
Can you hear me now? No.
It might just be me. My bad. Just keep talking. I'm sorry. It might just
I
be
can
me.
hear you. I can hear you.
Okay,
Loud and
maybe.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, all right. So, what was I saying? Yeah. So they don't necessarily. What was I about to say? Yeah. Okay. So, the road to hell is paved on good intentions, right? And sometimes these people might think that they're helping, but they're doing more damage. When we was in the private chat a couple of weeks ago before the show, this is one of the points that I kind of wanted to touch on. So it's important to kind of be able to recognize when someone's voice is too heavily influenced on what y'all doing. We talked about the good aspects of having wise counsel or seeking out wise counsel. Brother Shema mentioned the motive of people and what they're there for. But not everybody think that they're doing a bad thing because they're telling you to do X, Y, and Z, and in that order, and then waiting to see the outcome, and then say, "Well, now do this," like they're controlling you.
Right.
I think the thing to do when that happens, recognize when their voice is becoming too much in your relationship, or when their voice starts to kind of drown out the people who are actually living a relationship voice. So if grandma or granddaddy got their foot in the door and y'all trying to close it, you know what? I'm gonna bring up an old TV show. I think it's called Everybody Hates Raymond. Do y'all remember that? Okay.
Love that show. On the low, I'm they're not Israelites, so I'm not supposed to like them, but I like them though.
No.
Dad, King of Queens, yeah, you no doubt, Aki. I like, yeah.
So back when that show was airing, I think the mother either lived right next door.
Yeah. Oh man,
right down the street or something, and she was always coming in the house cooking.
Yeah.
Cooking. Oh, you don't do this right. Being a crazy in-law.
Yeah.
But that can happen with men too. I mean, I've seen cases where, the old heads, them told the younger person, go do this or you do this or, don't let her be like this to you. You the man.
Right.
Some crap like that, right?
Right.
So as Tamar always say, shout out to Tamar, find a balance, right? And that's the key. Even though she might not have heard me because her ears are a week older.
Yeah, they're aging rapidly from
from week to week. So at the same time, when you're dealing with situations like that,
right.
I remember in the show, the wife basically told the mom,
Deborah,
to leave. Like she was like, get out. Bye.
Right.
Love you, but you got to go.
Right.
Didn't say it like that. And then, right. The mother was angry and sad and not speaking to her for a couple of days or whatever the case may have been. But sometimes we just got to be real blunt with people and say, okay, I know I asked about this, but I got this.
Right.
Perfect example. Not really a perfect example, but a good example. So yesterday I was preparing for the Sabbath, and I was cooking some rice and beans, and I had my rice going already, and I asked my brother's moms for some beans, and she was like, well, yeah. She said yeah. Then I was like, okay. She was like, well, do you know how to cook them? Do you need me to cook them for you? Do you need me to do this? Well, you should go do this and then let them simmer for this amount of time. And I'm like, I got this. Thank you for your advice.
Right.
But I'm good. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And sometimes not being disrespectful, I know the wife in the show eventually apologized to the mother because she hurt her feelings.
Right.
But she sat her down and was like, this is our relationship and you're overstepping your boundaries. And being healthy enough to not snap on somebody, but also being stern enough to kind of stand your ground and let them know, that this is happening, and talk to whoever that other person in a relationship to. Talk to them first and let them know this is how you feeling and this is where you at. Because a lot of stuff can be diffused if that party closest to the person creating that voice kind of, cuts that voice versus when the other person, you know, comes in, because then, you know, that just clears up a whole bunch of red tape. But
Right.
the people in a relationship being solidified was saying, okay, this voice is overshadowing any other voice within the room, and they're from the outside. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. I guess short and simple. Sometimes you just gotta tell them to step and close the door.
Also, Martin.
It's a Martin, you know, step and close the door and deal with some stuff internally. Then, you know, tell them, all right, you know, we're gonna crack the door a little bit. You judge, y'all as in the relationship judges how for or how loud or how quiet that voice is going to be, which could be as simple as setting certain guidelines for yourself.
Yes, sir.
You know, dare I say, we talked about contracts on this show and previous things, but creating a conversation piece to where both parties feel this is my escape word, this is my safety word, letting you know, okay, under these terms, if we go outside of these terms, this is too much for me. You know, whether that be, you know, I don't need you talking to your mom about this aspect of our relationship. So let that be plain. I don't want you talking to.
But don't go to the father. The father can be gossipy. I'm just saying.
Can I was gonna get there. I was gonna get there.
Oh man.
Y'all see this? But
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
good point. You know, or don't go to your pops and tell him X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? Or don't go to your cousin Tyrone who got the bachelor pad across town when you upset. Because you know what happens at the bachelor's pad.
Yeah, bachelor things.
Okay? So that's what I mean by seeking that wise counsel, because you can go ahead and set the narrative. Like Shema said, his cousins told him, equally agreed that they could come talk to him.
Right.
Whoever those people are or that group of people, discuss it internally first before you say, okay, I'm about to go which brings us back to what the book say, you know, and Matthew, you know, when you have an ought against your brother, you know, go to them first. Then you go ahead, if you can't gain them, then you go ahead and bring another person with you. Unbiased person with you.
Right.
You know? Because a lot of times people go and they go to their family and they family, well, like how you said, well, I ain't like her anyway, or I ain't like him anyway, or he ain't no good dog anyway. Like,
right.
I mean, I could have made that decision for myself. I'm trying to ask you, how should I handle this? Or I'll give you a perfect example. I was at work and the girl was having an issue with her boyfriend. And the other girl was like, well, what she said? Pour sugar on his car, something petty, right? Don't ask me why. That just sounds like a waste of sugar. You know, I think it was mess up his car or something, put sugar in the tank, something crazy like that. She was like, well, when my boyfriend did X, Y, and Z, you know, I went upside his head. And I'm like, I'm sitting there, you know, doing my own little paperwork, like, well, that ain't such a good idea. You know,
right.
Meanwhile, the other young lady never had a committed relationship for longer than 6 months. You know, so I'm sitting there like, you sure that's the advice that you want? I mean, being combative and stuff like that ain't going to get the result that you want. That's going to make him push away even more. So I waited till all the noise was gone, and I just told her, you know, maybe you should sit down and talk to him and tell him exactly how you feel about whatever their situation was in a quiet, humble way that's not aggressive, because you already know he's going to meet your aggression, right? So in a case like that, see if y'all can talk about that. If she has an issue with anger, whatever the guy's issue was,
right.
Talk about it, and, you know, move from there. Let him know what it is first. She never even told him how she felt about it. I'm like, you over here having a conversation with your work buddies and everything, but you ain't able to talk to the man. Or whoever. So that sometimes when them voices get a little too loud, it's good just to tell them to go home. So
Yeah.
I needed your help for that, but this one I got. I'm gonna yield on that.
Indeed. Wow, it's a lot to digest on that one. Yeah. Well, I think one of the problems with that, going well, kind of camelbacking off what Isaiah just said, but also returning to the what Sister Tamar had brought out as far as you know getting that getting that input from people that's almost kind of overbearing at times, like especially from the older generation. And I think it's because there's a massive disconnect um, culturally and culturally and value wise. There's a disconnect between generations. Like there was like all right, I'll say it this way. There was a time, just from a scriptural standpoint going forward, there really was no such thing as our marriage. It's the community's marriage.
Exactly. Yeah. Ain't no lies and ain't no secrets in Israel. I always say that.
Right. It was the understanding was that that you had relative privacy, but at no point were we supposed to believe that the community doesn't have an act or doesn't take an active role in the marriages. One of the reasons why communities were able to thrive is because everyone felt responsible for another. If a sister's having issues, you had other sisters that come to say, "Hey, sis, what is happening?" Oh yeah, this, that, and the third. And one sister might be like, "Oh yeah, I understand." Another sister might be like, "Yeah, sis, yeah, you're out your mind. We need to talk. you're playing yourself." And the same thing with brothers. The brothers are supposed to come in and tell me that, I'm out of my damn mind. So, like, yeah, you're twisted. Yeah, exactly. So from ancient times, even going up until the 1940s and 50s, in this kingdom, in Black communities, there was an understanding that, that just because, that a man's responsibility and his accountability to his daughter didn't end when he gave her to this man for marriage. Just like, yeah, I'm giving her to you, but she's still my daughter. I'm still her father. And under the Most High, fathers and mothers is the Most High on earth for their children. So there has to be an understanding that off rip that yes, they do and must play a role in the in the forming of this newly I don't want to say christened, but this newly formed marriage, whatever like that. They have to play a major role because they are the progenitors of your lives. They gave you life. So, but in ancient times, there was an understanding. There was a culture that, I'm saying, that allowed that type of thinking to build. It allowed that kind of, that kind of thinking to grow. There's an understanding that we have a community, communing. Everyone is responsible for each other. A sister is not going to allow her sister to be in an abusive marriage. A whole troop of sisters is going to come bang on that door and be like, "You're going to bring Tamara out of here," whatever. There's an accountability. Same thing with the brothers. The brothers are going to be like, "Yo, brother, you got to come up out of there, man. Let her do what she's going to do. Let's go over here and whatever." There was an accountability. Unfortunately, after, and this kind of goes back into the whole so-called civil rights thing, where where the accountability in our communities, you saw the beginnings of the breakdown, where there was, once the 70s came, then we had this attitude of, this is my child and you can't tell me what to do with whereas our parents understood that if your child is cutting up in the street, there was a line of adults present that was going to get up in that child's behind way before the child get back home to get another whooping by the parents. The understanding was that no, that is our child. So Miss Rose, who lives down the street, she sees your son cutting up. She doesn't call you to say, "Oh, listen, something's going on with your son or whatever. No, she goes and snatches home little man up or little girl up and say, yeah, you're gonna get this whooping. And afterwards, now get your behind to your house. And I'm gonna call your mother and tell her what you've been doing. And I'm gonna call your father. Now, you know, if your father comes back, has to leave work to come deal with you, he's gonna really get up on you. There was an understanding. So that's why children didn't cut up in those times the way they do now, because everybody is watching them. Everyone is spying out their liberties, per se. Like, what are you doing? What are you over there on the corner doing? What are you over here with these guys or these girls? 70s and the 80s comes along, you still have that older generation that still has the feel that, yes, I can come in and tell you about your relationship. I can come and tell you this, that, and the third, whatever. But that break, you know, that disruptive element of the civil rights movement put into the minds of that next generation that you don't have to listen to the older heads. You don't. Why? Because, like the 5%er says, your understanding is the best understanding. You know everything that you need to know about these relationships, so you don't have to consult with them. So you have this, this dysfunction that has occurred in that generation. So now we're like the older heads are looking from the perspective of, anything I tell you, you have to concede to it because I'm the elder. Which that's not always true. But then you have the younger generation that's like, I don't have to hear anything you got to say, which is also, there. I think, again, going back to what Isaiah said, you have to go, well, and also everybody on this panel, there's a balance. The young people have to understand that that they haven't lived long enough to gain wisdom yet. You haven't lived long enough. You have no wisdom yet. You have knowledge. You may have some understanding, but you don't have wisdom yet. And the older heads have to also understand that, listen, just because this generation is younger doesn't mean that they don't have knowledge, that they don't have something that they themselves can bring to the table. There has to be a mutual understanding with that. And I think it goes, again, back to what was stated earlier, that if you don't have parameters, like Isaiah said, if there's not parameters laid out on how people, let's say like parents or grandparents, can come in and offer advice, if you don't put parameters in place, yes, you are going to have a situation where they're going to be running the relationship. A good example of that is if an older, I really don't like the term older head. It sounds so, but when an older person comes and gives advice, like my approach would be like that's some good information. I will take that into consideration. So what it does is it lets them know that, yes, I hear you. I hear your wisdom. I hear it. But by saying that I will take it into consideration, it puts up a fence to let them know, like, I'm not going to go willy-nilly off the cliff with what you're saying. I will consider it. And it puts the barrier there to let them know, like, oh, okay. And they'll kind of just, because I had the same situation with my mom. She tries to get whatever like that. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll think on that. I'll mull over it. And that's it. I don't be like, oh, yes, that's great. Or I don't, just like dismiss it. I just know that's good. I will consider it, because that's what righteous judgment tells us to do. I will consider what you're saying. I'm not saying that I will follow it. I will just consider it. Because you have to sit there and you have to think on it. Like, just because you gave it to me doesn't mean I have to run with it. I have to sit back and say, well, first of all, is it workable? And if it is workable in my situation? Is it workable for my wife or for my husband? Because just because it works for this marriage doesn't mean that it's going to automatically work for this one. So these things you have to be able to sit down and mull over these things and figure out, if that wisdom is wisdom for your scenario. But I think it's just a matter of giving the older generation the ability to participate in the molding process. Because again, if this couple has been married for 50, 60 years, they might know what they're talking about. Because nobody stays married for 60 years based off of a farce. You know, that's a long time to be living a lie with each other. Like, I can't stand you, you can't stand me, but let's just stay married. Like, I don't know about that. So, I mean, and it kind of goes, and I think the brother Isaiah, he made a very good point in even bringing up that show, Everybody Loves Raymond, because that is the prime example of an older person who goes way far and beyond their scope of influence, to the point where it seemed like the mother, it was almost like she was married to her son. Like, just straight dismissed the wife. Like, you're irrelevant. This is about my son, and that's dangerous grounds. I mean, why? Because then it puts the wife in a position where she now has to tell her husband, listen, you have to choose now. Am I the woman in your life, or is your mother? And if she is, and if she's, then why don't you go commit incest? Well, go marry your wife. Go marry your mother, because clearly you don't want a wife. You don't want me. And those are the, and I, just as my last point, there was a movie. I don't think Tyler Perry made the movie, but it was an excellent movie. It was called what was it? It was with Morris Chestnut and Taraji P. Henson. Oh, excellent movie. What was that? Not Easily Broken. I don't know if y'all heard that movie, whatever. Matter of fact, I think T.D. Jakes produced the movie.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't see it, but I heard of it though.
Yeah, excellent movie, and it's talking exactly about what Isaiah had brought forth about. Here he is, Morris Chestnut's character, good man, whatever. Taraji, good woman, whatever, but they start having issues pertaining to having children. Morris Chestnut's character, he wants children, but he definitely wants a son. He's a baseball coach. He coaches little league baseball, and he used to be a baseball player, but he got injured, and so now it's like, okay, I'm just gonna coach, and he's always coaching this young boy, and he's like being a father to this young boy, and Taraji's character doesn't exactly appreciate that. She's like, why are you acting like you're his father and he already has a father? But she's ignoring the fact that he's desiring for children. But Taraji's character, I think she's a lawyer, whatever, and her thing is, I ain't got time to be having no children. I got my career going or whatever. But they're having these little back and forths, trying to figure out what we're gonna do. But Taraji's mother, she is so overbearing in the movie. Like, she comes in and like just straight dismisses him. Yeah, whatever. What you need to do, daughter, is yada 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 yada. And the storyline, it builds up to the point where I'm not gonna say she pushed him into the arms of another woman, but certain situations occurred where he kind of was almost in the process of straying. He never did, but he almost strayed, whatever. But there's an argument that occurs where Taraji's character is almost trying to understand Morris's character, but the mother, played by none other than she plays the grandmother in Blackish, something Lewis.
She real loud, Jennifer Lewis.
Jennifer Lewis, yes.
Yeah.
She's the mother, and she comes in and she's just straight dismissing Morris Chestnut's character, and so Morris Chestnut, he's looking at Taraji like, yo, are you gonna let your mother talk to me like that? Like I'm supposed to be. He was like, yo, I didn't know that this marriage was composed of 3 people, and apparently my role in this marriage doesn't matter, because whatever she says, you do anyway. So why am I even here? But the movie is a great movie, but it's just to show that there's times, just like with the example Isaiah gave, where people overstep boundaries, and it's no longer them giving you advice. They're pretty much living your marriage. They're married to your spouse, and the only thing that stops them from being a full-fledged partner in this, in that marriage is the lack of sex. They're not having sex with your husband. So that's the only thing that separates. Other than that, your mother is the actual spouse now because she done overran the relationship. So I just think that there has to be balance. There has to be a point where, the older, the elder statesmen and stateswomen, they understand that yes, you can give your advice, but still, allow the younger people to consider what you're saying. And the younger generation has to understand that we don't know everything. That's why we have elders. Let me consult with them. But using, like the brother said, using wise counsel, just taking these things and balancing it out and see what works, what can't work, or whatever. We have to get past the disconnect in the generations and make that connection. And I think it just comes with balance.
Shema, you ready to say something?
That was a long rant too.
Yeah, that was good. Shema?
Right.
Okay. Okay. All right. What? So do you want to say something? Or no? Okay, never mind. Just to your point about Devlin, about the respect. I think that's important too. We do want to have feedback from our elders, from older people. So even in hearing each other, we should be able to approach the person with the same type of initial respect. Because there was a situation where an assumption was made by somebody in my family about somebody else, and I had to defend this person. You know what I'm saying? Like I appreciate what you're saying, but this person is blah blah blah. And so I think, and then the person that I'm referring to is not even in the word. I hate to use that word in the word, but for lack of a better word, they don't believe as I believe when it comes to the book. So there is no similar common background to even approach situations, which is going back to the initial point that Shema made about checking this person. Are they even able at this point, not that they won't grow into it, or that sounds arrogant, I'm sorry, not that they don't have anything that is useful to share, but that if you're not coming from the same foundation as I am, or at least speaking to me from that foundation, then it's impossible for you to not jump to conclusions about somebody or not carry your baggage into your advice that was not even based off of something that was real, was all in their mind. They had this whole concocted story about something, and they never came to me and said, this is the concerns I had. So as a younger person, I had to be the adult in that situation. I had to say, like, if you had already told me that this bothered you years ago, you know what I'm saying? So like you just said about, but being balanced in that way, being able to push back on things that are offensive. One thing I will say before I say that is that even in the pushing back, I really do believe that we have the right to express ourselves, not in a way that's offensive, but just anger. So if I'm angry or frustrated or sad, I should be able to express that without an elder or vice versa. If the elder was mad, whatever, they should be able to express those feelings without it being taken, without it being offensive. You know what I'm saying? So it's definitely communication. All I'm saying is that communication is very important either way, because it's not that. I think people in their hearts of hearts, if they really wanted somebody to help, they're not gonna necessarily not want people to help, but it's just the way we approach situations and long suffering and all that other stuff, and being patient with each other and communication. But that can't happen unless communication is open. So even in situations where there's too much involvement, the person that's closest to the person that's talking should be able to say, cut them off at the pass, be the gatekeeper for the house. Somebody got to stand at the door. It should be Abba, but if Abba ain't there, you know what I'm saying, Mama should be able to stand there and do the same thing. So that's one thing. That also, it was something about, about the point about having people come into your relationship, whatever it is, friendship, if you're in a courting process, a marriage, if you're looking for advice to strengthen your situation or to resolve a conflict, it's also good to come to that person as a collective. So I think it's the problem happens when it's an individual to the individual, because first of all, the person, I think it says in Deuteronomy where it talks about I think that's right. I mean, I'm making it up, but by having more than one witness. See what I'm saying? So 2 more witnesses, right? So if somebody's coming to you and they telling you they side, they're not telling you the whole story. So you can't even, in your honest point, as you trying to do the right thing, you can't even do the right thing because you don't know the whole story. So just as a food for thought, if people decide to invite, y'all both should be able to come to this person. That way, everything will be aired out. Ain't no secrets. Ain't no retelling, like the telephone game. I'm telling the story this time. By the time you get run the block, now it's a different story. You can X all of that out, and then it shows the person you're coming to that you all are unified, at least in resolving the conflicts in whatever situation y'all in. So I just want to throw that in there. About that. That's good. Yeah, I think Shema
he dropped off.
had to leave. Yeah. So but yeah, okay. So we can. Do you want to say anything else before we get ready to do some closing remarks about solutions and whatnot?
No, I was just going to touch on the fact that you made a good point, especially coming to whatever person as a collective. That's why they have things like relationship counseling and that type of stuff.
Right.
Which I think is a healthy addition to any relationship, whether it be a friendship or anything else. But a lot of those things, as Brother Shamar, Brother Zed, as well as you, Tamar, have added, it's important to kind of set those parameters in the beginning. A person don't know what they can't talk about, or they don't know what offends you if you don't tell them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So build a rapport and let them know, this offends me, or as Tamar said, position somebody at the gate, and maybe both of y'all could stand at the gate together and say, well, we respect your advice, but it might be better conditioned for us to go a separate direction, or to not, act that way. You know what I mean?
Right.
Back to Color Purple, when Shorty told my man's to slap, to beat her. You know what I mean? I mean, that's all she knew. So,
right.
I mean, we can even get into trauma within, communications. That could be another subject for another time.
Yeah.
But that same regard, she gave her what she felt was the best advice at that time. She wasn't, not like she didn't want them to be successful. Right. That was all she was introduced to, But if they would have used, how Tamar says, come together, and they could have all equally discussed how that would not have been necessarily the right advice. Especially since, she was hitting people like Louisville Sluggers over there.
Right.
But still, all in all, more better advice, like even at the end of that movie, how they all sitting at the table, and you see these women gain a voice. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And those things could have. There was a whole bunch of bad advice. Let's say the character played by Danny Glover and his father.
Right.
You know what I mean? There was a whole bunch of bad advice going on. And the father, I don't think, was in line to giving what's her name, her proper worth and everything. And it wasn't until Danny Glover's character kind of did that and went the right way that you kind of see even his situation improve a little bit or whatever. But the same regard, at times when we're getting advice, we can recognize that it might not be the best advice to get. And that's when we got to control that that level of us being petty and other stuff. Because the same way how that girl at my old job was like, go destroy his property or go hit him or something like that. That wasn't necessarily, that young lady who got that advice knew that that wasn't the right way to go. But, sometimes we rule in You know, we angry or we petty, and we want to do stuff maliciously, which is going back to what Shamal was talking about as far as motive is concerned. You know, just being mindful of the other person's motive, their intentions, and trying to look ahead and see, you know, knowing your partner and what's the end result of that. So if I did this, you know, what am I doing this for, and what is this going to get me? But I'll leave that at you know, let you guys take the floor and spin this in whatever direction we got to go.
Indeed. And the funny thing is that the statement that I was going to make anyway, you end up kind of leading right into that as it turns out. And that is that I think a lot of us, we make a lot of assumptions, like even pertaining to what we spoke about with intent. Like, and I said, when I spoke about people being biased earlier, a lot of times we can be biased unintentionally. Like sometimes we're biased deliberately, like, hey, listen, I believe what I believe and I don't care whatever, I'm just going to tell you this. Sometimes, maybe in a lot of situations, we are biased out of necessity. And I think, Isaiah, you said it very clearly in that you're giving advice. You know, a person might be giving advice because this is all they know. They don't know anything else. So when you don't know anything else, you can only give what you have. You're asking for a gallon of milk. I only have a pint. I can only give you what I got. You know, you can't be mad at because it wasn't a gallon. You're just like, well, okay. And I think a lot of times we're biased because of our vantage point. We don't know anything other than what our experience has, you know, like, so for instance, when you have boys that grow up in a house with a single mother, there's a couple of messages that the boy gets. One message is, okay, my father's not here. The other message is, well, mommy's here. Now, that's not a bad thing, depending on the narrative that comes after it. So if the narrative is, well, yeah, your father's not here because he's a loser, because he ain't no real man, and whatever, then of course, the vantage point of that boy is going to be growing up is what? My mother is a great woman, and my father, he's this horrible man. The message that this boy now gets, of course, going forward is my mother can do nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now she might have been a flipping whore all throughout her younger years, and that was the reason why the father left. And unfortunately I'm speaking somewhat from it, from an experience. You come to find out, like, oh, that's why Pop left. Oh, but I didn't get that information when I was a child. He left because he's like, hey, I'm not going to be one of 6 guys. No, I'm out. And I didn't learn that until I was in my 30s. I didn't even know what the backstory of why my father wasn't there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff, and vice versa. There's just a lot of, and the things that my mother raised me with, with these understandings that, oh, there's never a reason to ever put your hands on a woman and all these. I understand that this is all she knows. So the information that she gave me is based on her limited understanding. Like I said, she had me when she was 14. So when you're a 14-year-old girl, how much are you really going to be able to teach your child?
Right.
At that, when he's 5, 6, 7 years old, you don't really know much. So that's why, when I look at these scenarios and I say, especially in relationships, we're told to seek counsel. It doesn't say to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Just seek it. Everything doesn't have to go in your bag. It's like when you're in a supermarket and you're going down the aisle and you're looking at stuff. Sometimes you pick up things, you look at it, and you look at the, how much does it weigh? You look at the ingredients on it or whatever, and what are you doing? You're considering, do I want to purchase these gandules, these beans? Do I want to purchase them? And sometimes you put them in your, in your cart. Yes, I'm going to utilize this. Or sometimes you might look at it and be like, and you put it back on the shelf. And that's what we have to do, of course, with advice from anybody. Some things are meant to go in the cart. Some things are meant to be left on the shelf. But the fact that they're on the shelf, that's a good thing, because that means it's always available. Anybody is open to giving me advice. I'll accept advice from anybody, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
Some things are meant for the cabinet. Some things are meant for the pantry. Some things are meant to go back to the store. Everything is not meant to go into your pot, you know, but it's good to know that you can have it when you need it, you know. But I just want to just end just this real brief. Maybe this can go into another idea for a show, and that is that a lot of times, going back to what Tamar said, as far as people, you know, seeking counsel without their other partner, I think, and for, you know, just from like even from a counseling standpoint, and you know, I think a lot of those scenarios stem from the possibility that these people, although they may be going for counseling, they may be going for counseling not to establish or fortify the marriage. They may be going to try to find intel or information on how to do what they already want to do, and that is end the relationship. Which is probably why they don't go with their partner. Why? I don't need you there for me to get information about ending it.
That's a good point. That's a real good point.
Why would you be there? I'll keep you on a need-to-know basis. Now, if we're trying to keep this marriage together, yes, you should be present. Absolutely. But if I have no intention on moving forward in this relationship, why would I need you present to get information on anything? So, I mean, these are things that we may want to just consider. Like, it's so many layers, man.
Yeah, that's true. We have a couple of minutes left, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say, in corporation with that, we can't leave out the aspect of fear and trauma being a reason why, you know, that person might not fear that might not feel that they have a voice within
Right.
relationship or that nucleus. So, you know, sometimes in that sense, I've seen people go to counseling to try to find out and build what that voice is of, or do group counseling along with individual things to kind of, you know, build themselves back up to a point where they feel as though I can express myself. But, you know, those are more extreme situations.
Right.
And, you know, negative aspects. I know, Tim, I'm about to hit the closing remarks because we don't got much time left. But I wanted to say, since this is going to make its way to YouTube eventually, always like to throw out the like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll let Tamar take over from there.
Oh, you know. Yeah, so we trying to be sophisticated, right? So we're trying to go to YouTube. So all the past episodes are currently on there as far as when we start doing Facebook. Now the blog talk stuff is gone into a deep dark hole probably, but everything since we've been on Facebook is on there. Interestingly enough, it was 7 episodes, and so, you know, that's always prophetic to me. But 7 episodes are currently on there now, and we're gonna upload this, most high willing, right shortly after the show today, and then put it on there. So the YouTube page is Love Language, the Roundtable. If you just type that in, I'm sure you'll find us. And like, share, and subscribe. We would like to eventually transition to that platform so we can have more dialogue and communication. But y'all pray for us. We're trying to work this thing out. So that's all I wanted to say. Also, if you have any suggestions, Love Language, the Roundtable is also our Facebook page. You can put messages in there, inbox us individually or on that page for topics, and then Love Language Roundtable at Gmail is also our email address. So different ways to get in contact with us, and we would love to see y'all on here too. I have more women voices, men's voices, just to continue to grow. We know that we can only grow as often as we gather, and as many voices that we have, that allows us to grow even more. So most high will be back next Saturday, noon Central, 1 Eastern, with another topic. So shalom.
Hallelujah. Shalom.